Alrighty, we are live.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chair Sage Turner, and I'd like to welcome you to the August 16th Housing and Community Development Committee meeting. All council members and staff are participating virtually today. For those of you out there with us, welcome. To help our audience follow along, I'll be stating each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the city's website on the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. That number, if we're calling in, is 855-925-2801. You'll be prompted for a code, and that code is 9791. For today's meeting, we also have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To do so, you will use the same number, 855-925-2801, and meeting code 9791. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. At this point, callers will hear. For more options, please press star. Pressing *3 will allow callers to continue to listen live and join a speaker queue, and you will have 3 minutes to speak. Just a friendly reminder to stay muted unless necessary or need to speak up. And if you would like to raise your hand or be in queue, just give me a virtual wave. I'm going to now go through and introduce all committee members who are participating with us today. If you all could just quickly unmute and give us a quick hello as I call your names. Mayor Shanika Smith.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley.
Good morning.
City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Good morning.
Community and Economic Development Director Nikki Reed.
Hello, everyone.
And Affordable Housing Officer Sasha Bertinsky.
Good morning.
Great. I also see we have with the Attorney's Office, Janice Ashley with us. All right, everyone. We are going to get going on the agenda. The first item, number 1, is to approve the minutes from July. Did anyone have any alterations or comments or changes? And if not, may I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. And because we're virtual, we're going to be doing a roll call vote today. Vice Mayor Smith?
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley?
Aye.
Myself, Sage Turner, aye. And that completes item number 1. So if you're listening at home, we're quickly moving on to item number 2. And that is the proposed purchase and sales agreement between 319 Biltmore. And I believe, Sasha, you'll be kicking this off for us. So please go ahead. Thank you.
Actually, I think Nikki's going to start.
I'll tee it up and then I will turn it over to Sasha. We do have a team from Laurel Street, and so we'll turn it over to them towards the end and they'll introduce their team and finish out the slides. So Katie, if you will pull up the presentation, we'll get started. Thanks so much. So really excited to be here today. This is a long time coming. So really in recognition of this key milestone. So next slide, Katie. Okay, so we're here today to share a mixed income project that will deliver 212 units, with 65 of those units being affordable. That affordability is spread across 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, which we'll go into further detail on in just a second. Our development partner here is Laurel Street Residential, and they are proposing the following terms. I will note that these have been updated since we posted on Friday, and we'll walk through that later on in the presentation. The terms on the floor right now are a land purchase price of $1, a 30-year affordability. That's in recognition of the 65 units being affordable, so that does adhere to city policy. And also with that, the city intends to fund the construction of a traffic signal at White Fawn Drive there at the intersection of Biltmore Avenue, as it relates to the higher increase of people now living at that property and needing to support a signal in that location. We are seeking approval today by the Hcd Committee. The next step would be to bring it forward to City Council with the committee's recommendation included in the final determination from Council. Next slide. So just taking us back just for a second, original RFP was issued. This was back in 2020. really with the idea of having a mixed income and affordable community to really complement the Maple Crest at Lee Walker Heights community that was built there. We prepared an update to HCD on July 19th to really share out where we were with the project. And now we are ready to take it to the next step, hoping to get to a proposed purchase and sales agreement with Laurel Street Residential to allow them to move into the next steps in developing the property. They have continued to refine the project. As I mentioned earlier, we even have updated terms to share today. But we are coming today with those additional units that has changed since the last time we spoke at HCD, and a change to that pro forma with the city's subsidy also included. And so again, council will be asked to consider approval of the purchase and sales agreement as a next step in the process. Next slide. So again, just a quick image of the site, roughly 5 acres at 319 Biltmore, adjacent to property at Maple Crest and along Biltmore Avenue there. Next slide. So again, just some background on the city investment. So we acquired the property in January 2020 with bond funds. So our affordable housing bond funds funded this purchase for $5.3 million. At the time, there was a building on site. And the development of Maple Crest, it needed to include a street to connect that property to Biltmore Avenue, as well as do some environmental site remediation to allow for some dirt to be moved from the Maple Crest site onto the 319 Biltmore site to really help with the topography there. There are also infrastructure investments that were made, about $400,000 of bond funds. The roadway, as you can see, is another improvement that was made. Also, we are looking at that future investment of a traffic signal with our current estimate of roughly $400,000 in city funds to help in that investment. Another note of our investment at the into the affordable housing project there at Maple Crest. Next slide. Okay, so digging in a little bit into the details, what we wanted to do is just share some of the high-level terms of the proposal. And so I want to really pay attention and kind of walk through this slide so that we can really understand the impact of the affordability. And really what I appreciate about Laurel Street coming to the table is that in some projects that we have seen, a very viable way to get that affordability is to focus on studio and 1 bedrooms because the cost to build those are cheaper, obviously, than 2 and 3 bedrooms. It just kind of makes sense that would be the case. But I want to applaud Laurel Street because they are seeking to spread that affordability across that unit mix so that we can actually see families being able to live in this apartment complex. So let's walk through that. So right now, 215 units. So that's, again, an increase from what we saw last time with the total number of units for the site. Per policy, that is a 20% of those units being affordable to residents at 60% area median income. So what that means is that approximately 16 units, half of those would accept vouchers. And I'm just really realizing there's a little bit of a typo there, so forgive that. And then 10% at 80% AMI. So when we look at this chart, let's walk through that. So when we look at the 60% AMI and below served, what that means is that 22 of the units will be studio and 1 bedroom, 15 units available at 2 bedrooms, and then 6 units available at 3 bedrooms. And you can also see we've noted of those units, which will also accept vouchers. So that's for a total of 43 units. And then we look at the 80% AMI below. This is additional affordability on top of what our policy requires. We're seeing that 7 of those units of studio and 1 bedroom being affordable at that rate, 9 at 2 bedroom, and 6 at 3 bedroom. So again, I want to just emphasize with that total number of 22 of the units being affordable that we're seeing those incomes served at 80 and 60% across a bedroom mix. Then we also are showing the project that will be devoted to market rate units. Again, following that alignment with the initial intent to really see a mixed income project there for a total of 150 units that will be market rate. And that's what gets us to the 215 number. Next slide. And so here we have the deal components. And Sasha, I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you to walk us through the deal components here.
Sure. I just want to make sure. Okay. Right. So Nikki walked us through the unit mix. So that's the number of units, approximately 215 total. For real estate in financial terms, we have 30 years of affordability, which is, our policy says 20 years minimum with a preference for 30 years. So they are reaching that 30 years affordability, which is great. Land price would be $1. So the land serves as the subsidy for that affordable housing. And then just other considerations that would be a part of this deal. Construction would be to be completed within 24 months of closing on financing. So the financing, I think right now, Laurel Street is projecting for November 2023, kind of a closing of this full deal. So it'd be within 24 months of that date. They have a inclusion goal, minority women-owned businesses of 30%, and which is higher than the city's standard. And then also a commercial space, approximately 1,000 square feet for a nonprofit or community development organization. Next. So as we've kind of said throughout this morning, this project as it's structured meets our policies for implementing affordable housing on city-owned land. The land, the land is the major source of subsidy at $5.3 million is what we paid for it. And just to keep in mind, when we bought that land, it had no road going through it. So we have lost some land from our site with the road. And then we are also built more with the new signal right there at White Fawn and John Walker. We are going to lose a little bit of frontage of our land, about 20 feet coming in a little bit more. So the site's a little bit smaller. So the cost of unit, the subsidy is a little bit higher because of our land price. And just as a reminder for anybody, we did buy that land from Duke Progress, and they, by law, cannot sell land for lower than appraised value. So we were kind of stuck at that sales price. And some of our investments into the land also benefited Lee Walker Heights, as Nikki stated before. Next. So staff is very supportive of this proposal and recommending approval. It's a mixed income, aligns with the vision that's always been discussed in this kind of bigger picture, complies with our policies. We're getting a great unit mix with bedrooms, allowing for families to move there as well. Next. And then I think we just have this key takeaway slide again. That is a typo at 212. It should be 215. And at this time, I think we could take any questions, but Laurel Street has some slides to present to you as well.
Sasha, just one quick question. This is Sage. When we're talking about the traffic light and stuff, are we doing that because sometimes the developer would absorb that cost, or is that always a city cost?
I suppose in other cases, a developer might pay for that. That signal, we've kind of known that was coming for a while, and we were hoping that. Yeah. Go ahead.
So we are including it as kind of a part of the subsidy, roughly $400,000. Okay, just want to make sure I was clear. Thank you.
Right, and we have, if we include the signal, we don't have final costs for that yet, but the per unit subsidy does go up a little bit with that. But so we were, the land is very tangible, and we know what we paid, so it's.
And it's probably worth mentioning. I mean, it services Maple Crest as well, so the cost certainly isn't all just the project.
For sure, and there's development happening across the street as well. So. Katie, do you want to switch the slides to the Laurel Street slides? And I will turn it over to Ron Stewart is here with Laurel Street, and I'll let him introduce his team.
Good morning.
Go ahead, Ron.
I'm going to jump in and do a quick introduction. Good morning. I'm Deon Nelson. I'm president and CEO of Laurel Street. We're happy to be with you this morning. We do have our entire team with us. Ron Stewart, who is Senior Vice President, co-leads our development team, is here as well. and as well as other members of our development team. We're going to jump in quickly and run through some slides. Ron, do you want to drive? And then we would be happy to answer additional questions.
I can, but Sasha, I thought someone on your end was going to share slides. If not, I can do so.
Katie, do you have those, or I can pull them up?
Ron, I can't see who's on from Laurel Street. Do you
Oh,
know?
yes,
who's on?
I do. Yeah. So in addition to Dion and myself, we also have Tisha Germany, who is Director of Development with Laurel Street, and then Carice Presley, who is our Development Manager.
Thank you.
I have them pulled up. I can go ahead and start presenting if you guys are ready.
Thank you.
We are. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
one
while
moment,
Katie
get it
is
up.
doing that, thanks again. And I want to, echo both Nikki's and Dion's comments about just excited to be here. It's been a labor of love for us as an organization and me personally. I've been following this property since 2019. So very excited to finally reach this day. Honestly, I don't know what else to say. I think Nikki and Sasha did a very good job of stealing all of our thunder. And so what I'm really about to share is just a little bit of a rehash of what both Nikki and Sasha did so well at presenting. But nonetheless, you can transition to the next slide, please. So just quickly, kind of per our previous conversation, going to give a brief update of the market, kind of share with you our development program, go through our unit and income mix, walk you at a high level through our budget, and then talk about our schedule moving forward. Next slide, please. So given the current market conditions, we're still seeing a lot of volatility in the construction industry. And this is still primarily caused to the global pandemic that has plagued the country for the last 2.5+ years. What that has translated into has been some challenges in getting material, volatility in pricing, as well as labor shortages. As a byproduct of that, you've seen a lot of the construction costs start to increase. And what I'll show later is how we try to factor that into our model so that given the uncertainty that's in the market, we still believe that we are putting forth a very viable transaction that both the city and us will be very proud of. And then finally, I'll say that we're also factoring the fact that we're currently in a rising interest rate market and anticipates the Federal Reserve rising interest rates a few more times over the course of the next 12 months or so. Next slide, please. So as been shared, we are developing the site at 319 Biltmore Avenue. It's approximately a 5.5 acre site originally. We will develop it into at least 215 units that will be a mix of 1, 2s, and 3 bedrooms. We've been planning into the project a series of amenities that is on par with some comparable market rate housing, which will include on-site leasing, as well as a fully amenitized residence lounge, fitness center, a mail room, as well as outdoor seating. And then the big part is making sure the project is efficiently parked so that the residents and the commercial tenants have easy access to parking. And with regard to that commercial space, the goal is to partner with some local nonprofit or community development entity and lease that to them at a below market rate. Next slide, please. As what was previously shared, we are looking at this project to be truly mixed income. And so of that, 10% or approximately 21 units will be at 60% AMI. Another 22 units will also be at 60, but I think it's important to note that this portion of the project, the expectation is that we will get a commitment from the Asheville Housing Authority for project-based vouchers for these units. That goes a long way in helping the financing plan of the project. In addition to those tranche of units at 60% AMI, we will also have another 10% at 80. And then the final tranche is the remaining 70% or 150 units will be at market rate. Next slide, please. So overall, based on our current underwriting, we're looking at just over a $51 million project. We're going to finance this with a combination of conventional debt and private equity, in conjunction with obviously having the land as a subsidy. We're also committing to having a 30-year deed restriction, which exceeds the city's policy of 20 years. Next slide, please. So for our timeline, previously we had the update just to bring the committee members up to date on the project. Coming out of this meeting, assuming we're getting approval, we are planning to go before City Council and seek their approval next week on the 23rd of August. And with their approval, we will then kind of commence into the rezoning process, which we're anticipating that will take us up till first quarter of 2023. Upon receiving a rezoning approval, along with final approval of our purchase and sales agreement, we will commence on doing all of our building design with the goal of closing this transaction and starting construction fourth quarter of 2023. We also anticipate this project taking about 24 months to complete. And so we will be ready to start accepting residents by fourth quarter of 2025. So let me pause right there and open it up for questions.
Ron, if I may chime in, I just want to clarify on the slide for first quarter of 2023. Initially, when we were doing this underwriting, we were anticipating having a housing trust fund request and a tax grant request. We have worked hard with your staff to try to reduce the subsidy needed in this deal to only include the land. So while that line reflects that if there were a subsidy request, we would be bringing that to you simultaneous with the conditional rezoning and all the other approvals that you would be asked to make. But currently, we do not anticipate a Luigi or a housing trust fund ask. Again, any questions, we'd be happy to respond.
Just have a quick one. I'm trying to keep track of like subsidies and overall projects and affordability by square foot. Do you guys have like a rough total square foot? Because one thing that both you and staff came to mind is, at first we thought maybe 300 or so units might be good for this site. Now you've got such a mix of bedrooms. You're really, if we look at bedrooms, over 300 bedrooms, which is great. I'm just looking for the kind of a total square footage or rough estimate if you have one.
We can certainly get that for you, Ron. I doubt we have that at our fingertips in the moment, but we can certainly email that to staff and it can be sent to you today.
That's great. That's great. Thank you.
But you are correct, council member, that our unit count probably looks lower than some development scenarios you've seen previously. Our bedroom count is very consistent.
It's worth mentioning. This is something I know this committee and other council members have spoken to, the lack of multiple bedroom units coming to us. So it's a wonderful addition.
Yeah, and we tried diligently with our design team and getting feedback from staff that the city had a high desire for units dedicated towards family, especially at the affordability levels. And so we were sensitive to that as we developed our design. Nikki, I'll turn it back over to you. There's no other questions.
Great. So again, for the Hcd committee today, we are seeking for an action, and then with the anticipation of going to council Tuesday of next week. So I'll turn it over to
I
Chair.
have one more broad. Okay, sorry, thank you. I just have one more broad question. Are you all a affordable, like a, I don't know what you call the title, a qualified developer for tax credit projects? I think
Yes.
you are. I'm just curious if that was that here, and I think our RFP really spoke to wanting mixed income, and that may be why you went this route. But I'm curious if you consider doing a LIHTC program here that would make all of the units affordable, or if that was just not feasible with this particular parcel.
I think we were responding to what we understood the city's desire to be. And in many respects, when you look at us being a neighbor, if you will, to the redevelopment of Lee Walker Heights, we believe that this mixed income structure, which brings in some market units along with some affordability, is a good kind of neighbor to what you have next door, so as to not over concentrate affordability in any one location, but still make sure we're creating opportunities and access, as well as kind of a mixed income living environment.
Great, thank you. That's what I suspected. And I believe that is what we saw in the RFP as well. Thank you, everyone. I don't have any further questions. Any other councilwomen have questions?
I don't have
Okay.
any questions, and I don't want to anyone to think that my calm exterior means that I'm less than enthused. Really, rightly understood, I'm doing cartwheels in this space that I'm in. So, Madam Chair, if you're ready to entertain a motion, I'm ready to come with one.
Please go ahead.
I move to recommend that the Asheville City Council authorize the city manager to negotiate and enter into a purchase and sales agreement with Laurel Street Residential for the development of 319 Biltmore.
Second.
Do we? Okay, great. We have a first and a second. Any other discussion? And we don't have any public comment on this, do we? I didn't see any in the emails. Do we have anyone on the line to address?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you, Katie. All right, so there's no more discussion. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilor Smith.
Aye.
And myself, aye. And with that, I'll say congratulations to everyone that's been working on this for so many years. And thank you to the development team for being here today. We're thrilled to get to this point. And I think that's all we need from y'all today. You're welcome to sit and listen to the rest of the meeting, but we appreciate your time and energy this morning and all the work over the weekend as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have
Yes.
a great rest
Thank
of your
you.
day.
Appreciate you too. Thanks
For
again.
those of you, yep. Thanks. For those of you listening at home, we have completed item number 2 on our agenda, and we're moving on to number 3, which is a housing trust fund request from Mountain Housing Opportunities. I believe, Sasha, you're going to present this item for us. Thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So while Katie's pulling that up, I guess I'll begin. We discussed this at your last meeting, or you all discussed this at your last meeting. This is a housing trust fund request from Mountain Housing Opportunities for 16 Restaurant Court. This is on a similar track to 319 Biltmore, looking possibly for a vote today, and then it would move on to council next. So Mountain Housing is requesting $850,000 for purchasing 16 Restaurant Court. And they are requesting a loan at 0% interest and deferred for a period of 40 years, secured with a deed of trust. In the previous request, what we discussed last month was another additional $100,000 for pre-development activities, which is outside the scope of our policy, the Housing Trust Fund policy. So they have taken that out and they are pursuing other funding opportunities for that. So this project is approximately 50 to 60 units. 10 to 12 units being reserved for young adults aging out of foster care. And we'll talk about this later, but their pro forma indicates that they may come back for an additional $660,000 at a later date. Plus, they are going to other partners for funding for this project. Next slide. So as I started to say, this project is for 50 to 60 new affordable rental apartments. This would be a low-income tax credit project. 16 Restaurant Court is right there off of Tunnel Road, very close to many jobs, transit, grocery stores, and other retail. The site is approximately 1.31 acres. It would be a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms and have an affordability mix for, all the units below 60% AMI, but some at below 50, 40, and 30 as well. Next. So this is the site. There was a previous development proposed at this site, but it didn't finish the zoning process and has kind of been on hold. And MHO is proposing to buy this from that owner. Next. Now this, I haven't had a chance to change this. We've been in discussions with MHO that they would commit to affordability of 40 years. We like to match the affordability period to the loan period. And then, as we said before, 20% of the units would be reserved for young adults aging out of foster care. That's a pretty vulnerable population. According to some studies, between 31 and 46% of youth exiting foster care can will experience homelessness by age 26. So obviously getting folks in housing and getting them stabilized can prevent that from happening. And I think Jeffrey and Adeline can speak to this, but I think the estimate from Buncombe County is that we need about 10 to 12 of these units per year. Next. So as I said before, this site was previously approved for a housing trust fund loan of $1 million. That agreement was never closed. If this was approved, a part of this agreement would be rescinding that previous approval. And then this is a chart of other funding that they are seeking. Next. And here's the mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms and the income mix thereof. The majority of units are in that 60% AMI category, but there are 30 and 40% AMIs as well. Next. So in our analysis, this project is in a great location. Land acquisition is an eligible expense under the Housing Trust Fund policy. It's not something we often see. And, this proposal is a little bit different because we're there at the very beginning of this process and do not have other commitments from other partners. So the current proposal is for $850,000. The subsidy per unit is $17,000. Our policy says that the subsidy per unit should be $20,000 per unit. If they came back for that additional funding, which is about $1.5 million, it's over our $1 million threshold, and the subsidy would be around $30,000 per unit. Overall, big picture, that's not a bad subsidy per unit, for our market and current costs that are happening in affordable housing. And given the affordability mix and the units for folks coming out of foster care, it seems a reasonable number. Next. The one thing I do, and Janice is here as well, and the one thing about our policy is that it does say it's very clear that some form of payback is required. So there is some wording under special terms that waiver can be considered if extremely low income households are being served by the project. And it couldn't be developed without that concession. And MHO is telling us that this is true for this project. Generally speaking, the majority of our loans and the vast majority of our loans, are paying either interest or principal. Next. So the other piece of the policy is that funding commitments should be secured from other sources before the closing. Since they are on a short, my understanding is they are in a kind of a short window of the property being under contract. So that wouldn't be possible for this project. But what we've done, worked with MHO, is that this property would be secured with a deed of trust. City would be in first position until there's other lenders in place. And we've also discussed, and I put this in the staff report, we've discussed an agreement that whereby if they didn't start construction within 3 years of buying the property, that they would have to sell it. And I think we've had some discussions with MHO, just to let you all know, and you all can discuss this with them. They requested that if they did get approved for tax credits, that they could get an extension, I think, of 24 months. And Jeffrey can correct me later, but that makes some sense, right? That there's clearly activity happening and approvals, and it's moving forward. So that seemed like a reasonable compromise there. Next. So staff's recommending approval of this. It does not exactly fit our policy, and we don't have, other partners in yet, but given, the deed of trust, and we have some security that we can get that money back if this project doesn't work out, staff is comfortable with that. And MHO is committed to securing investments from other partners before they come back to the city for any future requests. And we're committing to looking at other, our housing trust fund policy over the next few months and benchmarking against other cities and trying to update our policy as well. We're not in a great position with our policy right now in terms of the new market and new conditions and how, things have changed in the landscape of affordable housing. I think that's the end of my presentation. Katie, is there one more? So this was just the key takeaway slides again. Yes, so, and I think we have, if there's any questions for me, I can take those. I think we've got slides from Mountain Housing that Katie can pull up as well. Are there any questions?
I have a few. Other councilwoman, do you have any? Go ahead, Sam. Okay. First question. So am I incorrect in that if it's a LIHTC project, that the affordability term is forever? There's a 40-year term that was mentioned, but are LIHTC projects not in perpetuity affordable? Or do they age out as well? They do.
They do.
So when that all, okay, I'm fine with that. Okay, so they're committing to 40 years. And then potentially like a land banking opportunity per se, because we're not sure if the other funds would come through or so on. We won't know, certainly not today before a vote. So have we ever done anything like this, or would we normally land and own it ourselves?
Would we normally, buy the land?
Yeah, well, essentially it feels like land banking, right? We're saying we don't know if this project can come to fruition. We clearly have a developer more than capable to get it there, with their history and track record. But if they're relying on funding in that capital stack that hasn't even begun their process, are we, well, I guess I'm just a little concerned. I think you highlighted the same concern I have in your list of pros and cons. So I guess I'm just a little concerned about the city being asked to purchase the land before the other funding is potentially in place. And so if I've heard correctly, let me make sure I understand. So what would happen is if this didn't work out, it was either 3 years or 5 years, maybe total, if they got a tax credit award, but they want 5 years to do the project. But if there's no award, then 3 years to do the project, or it defaults back to us or is sold. Is that what I heard?
I think that's the idea. So basically they would buy the property and a clock would start of 3 years to begin construction. Now they are applying for tax credits and you don't always get your tax credits on your first application. So that may take a few cycles. And I think the point is that, or the idea is that if they got tax credit approval within that 3 years, but hadn't started construction yet, that we could extend that period.
Okay.
If that makes sense. I do want to kind of want to defer to Jeffrey Barton on this, or, maybe he could explain it better than I am.
I'm going to say what I was thinking was it's not so much land banking as allowing housing trust funds to be used for land acquisition. So I was looking at other municipalities that have housing trust funds and how they use them. And it looks like Charlotte actually in their housing trust fund has a special delineation for processes such as this. So maybe when we look into changing our policies for Luigi or housing trust fund, we can consider circumstances under which doling funds for housing for land acquisition would be permissible.
Right, and it is permissible under the current policy, but I think what you're getting at is right. You know, there's not other supports in the policy for that. Like, there's not a lot of guidance for that, so.
Any other questions for staff? I think my remaining questions are for the development team. Vice Mayor, any from you? I see Jeffrey. Did you all want to share some slides, or you just here? I wasn't sure if there was a presentation or just discussion for you.
Yeah, Katie has them. I don't. If you're able to pull them up, Katie, thank you.
Well, while we're getting the slides up, here we go. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Jeffrey Barton, Director of Real Estate Development at Mountain Housing Opportunities. And we have other members of our development team here as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adeline Wolf. I'm a real estate developer at MHO as well.
And we're also joined off screen by Cindy Visnich-Weeks, our Director of Community Investments, and also listening in is Rich Olenichek, our Senior Real Estate Developer. So we're very excited to be here today. Thank you, Sasha, and all staff and council members for entertaining our request for a housing trust fund loan to assist with land acquisition for this property. Sasha really covered the high points of what we're proposing, so we won't belabor this. We just have a few slides and then happy to take questions from committee members. Really what this is all about, and Councilwoman Mosley, thank you for that distinction between land banking and land acquisition. That's exactly right. There is currently this piece of property that is for sale and we are under contract to purchase it with the intention to immediately mobilize into a development proposal. So site acquisition is the very first piece of the development process. And land banking is sort of at opportune times when land becomes available that we know might be appropriate sometime in the future for housing, then funding would be used for that. So we're really asking for an early partnership with the city on land acquisition, and as Sasha mentioned, with the timeline that would be built into the deed of trust, that our intention is to mobilize into a development proposal on this property. So the last point on this slide is that the city's investment on purchasing the property would then leverage outside investment through the tax credit program at minimum $6 million, which would reflect 60% of the project costs. And I say at minimum because that is built on the model that we included in our trust fund application, which is a 4% tax credit model. And there is potential for the 9% tax credit, which brings in more equity. So next slide. Just to reiterate the highlights that Sasha already covered, we intend to set aside 20% of the units for a target population of young adults aging out of foster care system, and have begun collaboration with community partners to make that a reality. We've secured both letters of support from Buncombe County HHS and the Housing Authority, who would administer those vouchers. And so we're kind of starting to galvanize the partnership to serve this particularly vulnerable population. The site itself is, as Sasha mentioned, very, very well located, close to jobs and transit. It aligns very closely with the recently adopted Tunnel Road Corridor study to incentivize housing units along the Tunnel Road Corridor. I think that corridor study said there are only 244 residents in the immediate Tunnel Road corridor, and that is far less than the number of jobs supported in that corridor. So on the right, you'll see the Larchmont Apartments that MHO built off of Merriman Avenue, very similar type of development, not right on Merriman Avenue, but one parcel removed or two parcels removed from Merriman Avenue, and providing a great opportunity for low-income families to have a walkable environment, transit-oriented environment, and access to all the community services surrounding. So this parcel on Restaurant Court we see as very similar. Next slide. And to summarize and circle back to the housing trust fund policy, this is an allowable use of housing trust fund policy, but there isn't a whole lot of guidance. So we encourage you, as Councilwoman Mosley clearly has done, to look at what other cities are doing in responding to this critical time in the explosion of need for affordable housing and the high cost and the interest rates that are making it harder and harder to do this type of development. So Raleigh and Charlotte are looking at strategies to encourage site acquisition along transit corridors using their bond funds and trust fund money. And we certainly, we may be a little ahead of the game here in Asheville, since the current trust fund policy doesn't spell out specific guidance, but this project could be a pilot to see how these types of investments can help the city realize its goals for affordable housing. And I will also note that it, as sort of an early investment, it gives the city some opportunity to ask for things like extended affordability. A commitment to 40-year affordability is in some of these other cities' policies for site acquisition. So I think that city staff is really keyed into how these early site acquisition investments can work. And I think we have a really great deal to collaborate and bring a good development to the community. So with that, I'll just, happy to entertain questions from the committee members.
Councilwoman, questions for the development? Okay. Jeffrey, is this a 9% or 4% credit, tax credit ask?
The short answer is we don't know yet. It would be appropriate for either. And we submitted our application, and since you have to submit a pro forma, we opted to submit the 4%, which is non-competitive, would likely have to be combined with another site. But we don't know. We know that it meets the criteria for the tax credit program and would tick all the boxes for NCHFA. So that, gives us the confidence that either mechanism could be used.
And I'll add to that I think we submitted this project preliminarily, even though we're unsure which path it will take. We submitted it as a 4% to kind of prepare you all and the rest of our funders for what, potentially is kind of the worst case scenario as far as, tax credit leverage.
Could you speak a little bit to why there are no other commitments before us? I mean, that being the policy that you're not able to meet. It looks like there's a over $3 million request to other entities in the region. And I guess could you speak to why that is, approach them, and what happens if they do not fund this project?
Sure, I'd be happy to answer in a couple of different ways. Buncombe County's affordable housing support program cycle is a once-a-year cycle, and that will not open up again until December. And so this property being in such a desirable location, our option period didn't extend to, through the Buncombe County funding cycle. So that's the reason we have not yet applied for Buncombe County Affordable Housing Support Program in support of this. And then I guess, the other aspect of our original request was to also assist with pre-development. As I think you've heard from other developers in previous HCD meetings, pre-development is extremely expensive, and it's become more so. We've eliminated that request of the city because in the meantime, between last HCD and this HCD meeting, we have put in a grant application to Dogwood to help with the pre-development costs. We don't know if that will get funded. It's not a guarantee, but that, we identified that as a potential partner on the pre-development side of making this a viable tax credit property. If that funding falls through, it will not prohibit MHO from moving forward. It will just, we'll have to pay for pre-development ourselves. Did I answer the question fully, or was there another aspect to the?
Well, the pre-development is 100,000 roughly. But what if neither Dogwood Health Trust or Buncombe County fund $1.51 million? What will happen to close the $3.2 million gap? Or will that, I guess what I'm asking is, will that return to us if you're not able to secure the other funding? Or do you have a plan B? Because what I'm a little nervous about is that we are, and I'm going to use the word land bank again, because we're going to invest in something to hold it, to hope that it comes together later. And if it doesn't, that may mean to come back to us. And I'm not sure, what that does for the per unit subsidy and so on. But do you have a backup plan should the other $3 million not come to fruition?
Yeah, we have a plan A, B, C, and D, which is why I think we said this site is appropriate for both the 4% and the 9% tax credit. I think the time mechanism built into the deed of trust is really the city's safety valve on recouping the upfront investment in the site acquisition, which again, this is site acquisition is not land banking per se. This project will enter MHO's active development pipeline, not sit on the back burner while we wait for other funding commitments to come through. We know that the site meets all the criteria of the current Buncombe County policy, but we also respect the once a year timeline for their funding to support projects like this. So if the city supports our request and we're able to purchase this property, there will absolutely be an AHSP application to the county in their next cycle. But again, you're right, those funds are competitive. It may take more than one cycle to acquire the funding. So really it's what we're asking the city to do is help us take this property off of the real estate market, the speculative real estate market, so that we can then begin the hard work of assembling the gap financing to build it.
Because I will say one of my concerns with not taking it off the market is who comes behind if MHO does not acquire the property. I think that's a perfect place for something commercial. And if we want to have affordable housing, I think we have this moment in time to make it happen. And Jeffrey, correct me if I'm mistaken, but didn't the county also already agree to fund MHO for land acquisition in Arden? So we wouldn't be the first in the county to give money for land acquisition for affordable housing.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. The site that we have in the current tax credit cycle, we applied for 4% tax credits for 120 units in Arden, just a 10th of a mile outside of the city limits. So, we'll see plenty of city workers living there, but is not in the city limits, so not eligible for housing trust fund. The county, through their ARPA funding, supported that project site acquisition. We also have been supported on a project outside of Buncombe County for site acquisition by Dogwood Health Trust. So it's not an unusual place for a housing partner to assist with, especially in the current climate. It's the most important investment to make to ensure development for affordable housing.
How many organizations like MHO are there in the state? You know what I mean? Like that provide total affordability in a nonprofit manner. How many are there in North Carolina?
So nonprofit affordable housing, kind of holistic affordable housing developers, there's really not many. To be a tax credit developer, you can be a for-profit entity, but nonprofits across the state, really 3 primary ones come to mind. There are several others, but DHIC in Raleigh, Dream Key Partners in Charlotte, and Mountain Housing Opportunities, have kind of the capacity and robust track record of delivering tax credit projects. There are others, certainly other great nonprofit developers in our region, Givens, that focuses on senior housing, Western Carolina Housing Partnership, and others. So, there are other developers like us, but in terms of, having the number of programs and kind of the robust commitment to emergency repair, home ownership, and rental development, I'd say those 3 that I mentioned.
Any more questions, Councilwoman Mosley? I'm not sure if it's my signal. Yeah, maybe my signal that's messed up. You're going to go up? Go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I don't know. It's Janice Ashley. I just needed a clarification if the council members don't have any more questions, but I just wanted to know the term, because I'll have to write the documents. So the terms of the loan, one more time. Sasha, you said the $850 at 0% interest for 40 years, but you said something about now sometimes you don't have to repayment. There's no repayment. I thought that's what I heard Sasha say, but what's before the council members now is due and payable at the end of 40 years, correct?
That's not been always totally clear, I'll be honest. I think that's where I was having a discussion with legal yesterday around this issue of loans versus grants. And I think we have to, if that's what we have to do legally, then that's what we have to do. I mean, Jeffrey, I don't know if you have any, right now the pro forma is not showing repayment during that, it is fully deferred into the 40 years.
And then not repaid at the end either? And not repaid at the end either? Is that what I heard Janice say?
That was my question, because we can we've done many that are deferred for the full term, but it's due and payable at the end or upon sale. Sometimes these projects sell. I don't think MHO does. So Jeffrey, the clarification, the request is deferred for the 40 years, then due and payable at the end of the 40 years.
Yeah, that's typically how we've drawn the loan document. The reality of affordable housing, local soft debt, is that at the end of the term, there's usually a restructuring of the financing. Sometimes there's a rehab that is necessary, and so there'll be a pursuit of rehab financing that could pay off the city. Sometimes we'll ask the city or the county or other partners to extend their commitment at that point of rehabilitation of the property. So it's kind of that's the typical mechanism for municipalities to invest in a soft loan that's deferred, where it's not fully paid off during the term of the loan.
I see Deborah has raised her hand. Go ahead, Deborah.
I just wanted to clarify with Nikki and Sasha that we are recommending a payback at the end of the 40 years. I want staff to clarify that that's where we, as I recall, landed. Nikki or Sasha?
Yes. I think also in my discussions with legal, I don't think I fully understood. There's some legal ramifications around funds for affordable housing and loans versus grants. So I think that has to be our recommendation. It is,
That is our recommendation.
sorry.
Okay.
I have a question, but it's not related to that. Any other comments about the particular legality of that component? MHO folks, we had just heard a project before you and we were sharing our excitement that some of the units would be 3-bedroom. Can you speak to why maybe there are no 3 bedrooms in this? If you just stuck with a 1 and 2 bedroom? Did you look at the boundaries?
I think for this site, it was a factor of the size and the proximity to Tunnel Road. You know, we like to and are encouraged to see the city supporting family units, the larger bedroom size units. For this particular site, especially with the special population that we intend to serve, the youth aging out of foster care, a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms seemed more appropriate. The 3-bedroom units often drive up your parking ratio too. And so limited to 1.3 acres and being transit served, this particular site felt more like a 1 and 2 bedroom site.
Thank you. So this might be more for staff. I just want to make sure. Oh, go ahead, Nancy. Go ahead.
No, I was interrupting you. Go ahead, Sage.
I was going to jump topics. Go ahead.
Okay, I was jumping topics too. What I was going to say, what interested me or caught my attention about this particular development is the need for housing for foster children. So I was looking at foster children through a racial equity lens, and I kind of already knew where it would lead me because in every category it seems something like this is the case, that Black and brown children are disproportionately amongst those children in the foster care system. So the last data I could come up with was from 2018, which showed that 23% of kids in foster care are Black and brown children. So that's, it breaks my heart to really even think about that. And Latino and, Hispanic, 21% of the foster care system. I don't know of another project in the area that has specifically had these children in mind. So I'm really supportive of this. And another number that came to my attention was that 50% of the homeless population has spent time in the foster care system. I believe this to be a really, really important opportunity that I don't want to let pass us by. So yeah, I was changing the subject, but I wanted to get those statistics out for consideration.
Well, to that point,
And they're important.
I'd like to ask Mr. Barton if who's administering the FYI voucher? Can we learn more about the FYI voucher, and if in administering the vouchers we can use a racial equity lens?
Certainly, yeah, great question. We would be working with the housing authority, who would be the entity that administers the vouchers, but we have committed to assisting them with the application process and a lot of the legwork entailed to do that. I would, and then in addition, our early collaboration with Buncombe County Health and Human Services is who we're going to be relying on to kind of figure out the referral mechanisms, and that's a great opportunity to apply a racial equity lens as allowed under the voucher program.
And also, last time I brought up the potential for on-site supportive services. Have you thought any more about adding that amenity?
Yes, that will be a key part of the programming as we build the massing for this site. There will be some meeting space to allow social workers to meet with clients on site. In addition to kind of the standard leasing office and other site amenities, we'll seek direction from the social service providers on exactly how that space should be configured, but in our mind, it's been just a dedicated kind of landing spot for service providers to meet with their clients on site and outside of their unit, importantly.
And another thing that was important to me that I don't know that I've heard other developers discuss is the fact that there will be units set aside for this particular group. The differentiation that I'm making there is we typically have developers coming to us saying they will accept the voucher, which is technically different from saying they will set aside a certain number of units. So this is something also new that MHO is proposing to do. Dedicated units set aside for those in the foster care or aging out of the foster care system.
Are those project vouchers, Jeffrey?
Likely not. They're likely not going to be project-based vouchers, but we have worked with a variety of programs administered at the state level to house special needs tenants. And so we've kind of worked out how the referral programs work for targeted populations. And this would just be a new subset of that target population. And they would come with the voucher to that unit, but it would likely not be project-based.
Just to clarify for those listeners, sometimes, renters come with a voucher and sometimes project posts the voucher and the units stay regardless of text. There are comments for the development?
I have another question. I kind of want to go back to land acquisition. Our housing bond program is very clear when it comes to acquisition. How many dollars are left there? Does it not cover their ass?
There are there are remaining bond funds, but we don't have any land banking bond funds left over per se. So
Land banking funds would be us banking the land and owning it, not, right? It's just a little bit. And that's why I was at land banking, like from the eyes of the practice, seeing how this is acquisition. From the city, it's falls apart, this is acquisition. Sorry, this is land banking. I guess I'm having some concerns overall about the timing. I think, like, I love the project, love the mission. I think that MHO is probably one of our strongest affordable housing developers in the community. And if anybody has the tenacity to pull this off, it's probably them. However, we're so clear on not being the first ahead and not knowing those funders. And I took the initiative over the weekend to reach out to some of the other potential funders just to see if it was on their radar and learn more about their timelines. And it sounds like the county's expecting a very competitive February application cycle, and those would be awarded in roughly April of 23 and then allocated somewhere summer and fall. But they alluded in an email that it would be uncompetitive based on the subsidy per unit. So so I just want to make sure I'm fully understanding what happens on our side. So if the funding doesn't come from other local supporters. So say we do this today, or this council recommends, then we purchase the land, but MHO in this case owns it. Then we're giving them a 3-year timeline from that date to get things moving. If they don't have a secured tax credit application or award in that 3 years and there's no movement, then the transaction becomes a sale and they would sell it and repay us, right? And if they were awarded tax credits in that window, we would give them an extra years because of the turmoil and work it takes to get it off the ground. Is that right? Okay. But most were 5 years out and it would be a required sale and then proceeds would come back to us. Is there a clause in there where we could keep it, or does it have to be sold?
Because we haven't written that clause per se. I mean, if council wanted us to write it so that we could take over ownership, I guess we could write that.
And how many instances development has MHO, once they've had land, walked away and not developed affordable housing on in your 30-year history? Is that zero?
Well, the Avery was one though, right? And I mean, Snapsy of this developers, obviously they have the track record for it. I'm just concerned about the other, what it means for us if we're up front, the other funds aren't behind it.
And that's just my concern. Other questions or comments for development team or staff? I think there's some callers in the queue. Okay. Janice, go ahead.
It's Sage, just following up on your question. So if you do want to add as a term that we would have some kind of right of first refusal, or we could keep the land or they could sell it, it might be an important term just so I know what you're going to expect in that the deed of trust document or the that we'll be writing. So if that is important, I mean, they could probably sell it for more than, in a few years, but even then but we might have an interest in holding on to it for other, affordable development. Sometimes it takes longer for us to get, as we've just seen with 319 Biltmore, we own the land, but it takes a while to get the developers to come back in. So it's up, I don't know if that's a condition.
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm getting at, because our intent here is to do affordable housing, and let's say this doesn't work out, then it's just sold, then we're back where we started. And I'm wondering if retention property, it may be, it can be discussed with full council. I'm not suggesting we add that today or anything, just kind of brainstorming around it. Okay, I do think we have some public comments. I knew there's someone on the queue. Any other questions? I see someone. Kevin, you have your hand?
Yeah, and I wanted to really quickly, before Kevin speaks, introduce Kevin. Kevin is a new employee with our department. He's the affordable housing specialist, and he has a great deal of experience and background.
Hello, nice meeting everyone. Nice meeting you. I was wondering if there was a city entity that could purchase the land and then provide an option to MHO, as opposed to helping MHO purchase the land outright. And so the city maintains ownership. It gives MHO a certain number or a certain time period to pursue their various financing sources. But the city still owns the land, and they have that option that they can put into the various financing applications that they're going to work on.
As well, it's a good question. Welcome to the team, Kevin. Nice to see you, and welcome to the city of Asheville.
Thank you.
That also came to me, and I just wasn't sure if you have your hand up if you want to respond to that.
Sure. Yeah, it's an interesting thought. What I would say is MHO has the property under contract as MHO, and in order to not, renegotiate with the seller, and I don't know that we could assign that option to the city. What I'd be particularly worried about is just the time delay of overcomplicating this. We really need to have the site under control to pursue the funding cycles for the county and NCHFA. So I think staying the course on our current request to have the city assist in the purchase of the property and get the security of the deed of trust and all the mechanisms that we've contemplated embedding into it is the most straightforward path for this to move forward.
Thank you for that. I was unaware that you had already had an agreement in place with the current owner, but I would not recommend this way of doing things going forward if we're truly concerned about protecting the interests of the city of Asheville.
I agree, Kevin. I guess one concern, Kevin, or those who don't know or listening in, is that this project came before us for a different developer, and we had awarded $1 million to get off the ground, and before it came back to us for another, I think it was $1.5 million, saying it just was possible without additional funds. And that's why I'm being extremely cautious, because now we've had this number of very reputable affordable housing in our community of units as well, away from this because we're able to the financing it needed to make it an affordable housing project. It sounds like the developer, a contract with this developer, and everybody, which is great. But the due diligence, I wish it could be longer. I wish the funders could be secured before the due diligence expires. And it's worried that it all fell apart before, that is echoing through through my concerns right now. So that's all my comments. Are we ready for public comment, or did anybody else have share or?
Is Deborah's hand up?
Yes,
I'm
yes,
sorry,
it is.
go ahead.
No problem. Thank you for recognizing me. I just have two comments. One is we think that we are doing what's in the best interest of the city of Asheville, particularly by allowing MHO to purchase the land in terms of staff's recommendation and having the necessary clawbacks that if this project isn't successful, we will get paid back, period. No if, and, buts, or whatever. We will get those resources back. Secondly, I hope that you are noticing at the 319 and with the this particular project that we are trying to connect a lot of dots in terms of looking at the entire needs of our community by looking at those who are aging out of foster care, vouchers. I mean, do you realize where we were 3 to 4 years ago? Nobody was accepting vouchers. And here we are today where it's almost common. Yeah, you're going to accept vouchers, not just for nonprofits, but 319 Laurel Street is a for-profit developer. And every development in the past probably year has said, we're going to accept vouchers. And that is due to you all's change 2 years ago in your policy to say, yeah, private sector, you need to do this. So I think, I know this, this gets really complicated because we got a lot of per unit this and that cost of that and so forth, but let's take a moment to exhale and you know, I don't want to say pat ourselves on the back, but what I do want to say is that we are making progress. And I think this particular project, 319, and I hope a whole lot more to come, is addressing broader community needs. So thank you for letting me jump in.
So if they're not project-based vouchers for the community, could they be used in other projects that they could be currently housed with their vouchers, right? This is a new voucher system for them, or other voucher accepting properties like 319 could foster these uses, right? Or missing something? Is this like a specialty of vouchers specific to?
You're having a little bit of technical
Yeah.
difficulties, but I'm sorry.
I think I got the.
I'm sorry.
I think I got the gist of it. Is like, is this a special voucher program? Is it new funding? And I think, yes, the FYI vouchers are, Jeffrey, I don't know if you want to answer that, but I've done some reading on it, but.
Sure, it would be new to our community. We do not currently, the Housing Authority does not currently administer this particular type of voucher. We would be assisting the Housing Authority in securing this new voucher for distribution into our community. And importantly, we would be providing units that will accept them and space for the support services necessary to help this population thrive. So that's kind of the plan. You know, as the city manager alluded to, voucher acceptance had been a huge issue and still is. That, you know, we still have a ways to go on it, but by providing the units, it gives some security in pursuing the vouchers, right? There's not going to be a problem of where do these vouchers get accepted, because there will be this known resource in the community.
And really what I was getting at is, can we help even more in other projects? Wonderful that they're not just specific to this one project. Thank you. Are we for public comment?
Yes, we do have 2 in the queue. Caller ending in 7043, your line is now open.
Hello, this is Nina Tovish. I'm signed up in the wrong place. It wasn't clear to me whether this queue was for general public comment or a specific agenda item. So I'm going to pass on this one at this time. Can I stay in the queue? Agenda item?
You're on mute.
I can't hear you.
I'm not sure how that.
I think you can just stay
for
on the
later.
phone, Nina, and then re-raise your hand. I think that's how that would work, Katie. Like,
Yeah, we'll call on you towards the end when we do public comment at the end of the meeting.
Okay. It may be the next agenda item. I'm not clear on how this works. So please keep me in the queue if you can. Thank you.
Yes. Caller ending in 3781, your line is now open.
Hello, everybody. This is Barry Bialik. I'm the chair of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, as well as a local developer in town. I just want to kind of share my support in favor of this. AHAC decided to support it primarily because funding has been dedicated to this particular land parcel for a long time, about the same amount. I think it's about $1 million. So even though this is not the most traditional use of the Housing Trust Fund, I do think it's a good use, and I do think this project has been kind of vetted through the city for a while. So I want to share that. I also want to share with my developer hat on that I've been on this parcel, and this is probably one of the easiest parcels to develop in the city of Asheville. It's flat. It has an 8-inch city main, city water main, and city sewer main right on it. I think it was intended originally to be a commercial parcel for a restaurant, hence the name. But it's a good flat parcel. It's a great location. It's easy to develop, so I would expect some of the site costs to be less than others. And so I do offer my support as a developer for this too. And I do think this is a good thing for us to consider, the same way that bond funds were allocated towards land banking. While there isn't a specific wording in the Housing Trust Fund policy for land acquisition assistance, I think this is how we look to change policies when good examples come up. So I think this is a good example of that. So overall, yeah, I would kind of recommend this use, and I thank you for your time.
Okay, that is it for callers that we have at the moment.
That's it. That's all for the callers at this time. Okay, thank you. So are any other questions or comments, or shall we move to a motion? We might be muted, Councilman.
Are we frozen, or is it just me?
Oh, I don't know if it's me. I'm sorry if it is. But if you're ready, go ahead, Councilman.
Okay. I move to recommend that the Asheville City Council approve Mountain Housing Opportunities request for $850,000 housing trust fund loan to construct 50 to 60 multifamily apartments for households at or below 60% AMI at 16 Restaurant Court, including 10 to 12 units for young adults aging out of foster care.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion or other comments? No, I'm gonna share my comments because I'm concerned. I'm not quite there yet, and I'm hoping it can be addressed by the time it comes to us at council. So my concern continue to be the deferred payment and the 0% and the uncertainties of the other stack. I would love to see it happen. I think this development can or the best shot at making it. However, I have concerns about the capital stack and lack of other funding and what that means if it potentially comes back to us. So I'm not going to be supporting it today. I'm really hoping we'll be able, by the time it gets to council. I'm happy to speak to the development offline later about additional details if needed. But if no other comments, I'll be moving to a roll call vote. Council or Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Leslie.
Aye.
And myself, no at this time. But I thank you for everyone being here and sharing so much information with us. And I believe that we'll move on to council and hopefully some things will come together that can encourage national support. Thank you, everyone, and you're welcome to stay on and listen. Otherwise, you're welcome to also exit now if you wish. And for those of you listening at home, we have, I'm sorry, was there a comment? We have completed item number 3, and we're moving on to item number 4, which is review the HCD committee work plan. And I believe Nikki Reed is going to walk us through this. Go ahead, Nikki.
Thank you so much. And yes, Katie, if you will bring up those slides, we have a short presentation today. And yes, we are here to talk about the work plan proposal for the committee. So next slide, Katie. So really at a high level, what we are hoping to achieve here is that an annual work plan for our HCD committee will serve as a useful tool that will allow us to plan and better organize the work of this particular city council committee. And what we'll go into is a little bit of just how these work plans are organized with the combination of both ongoing administrative items like the project review that you've seen today, as well as policy initiatives that will also include specific tie-in to some advisory boards and other committees. So we'll walk through that in just a second. And really, I think keep in mind that the council committee work plans are really intended to be dynamic living documents. That means that as we really pilot this, we are open to knowing that things may change. And we want to be cognizant of that as we go through this process together. And so really underscoring the idea that these are dynamic living documents, but will serve as an overall guide for this council committee, as well as staff, as well as our advisory board members throughout this fiscal year. And so this really is a pilot. You know, we're looking at to pilot this work plan development process with the Housing and Community Development Committee. And also there, we'll see that this committee work plan then proposes those linkages to the advisory boards to inform those future policy recommendations. So it's great that we've had this discussion today, because I think it will then hopefully connect in terms of how we see this rolling out with those needed connections and the work of the committee at large. So next slide, Katie. Okay, so really now looking at those high level areas of work. So one component of the work plan includes the regular and ongoing business of HCD. This includes projects and activities, much like you've seen today, where we are seeking to obtain the committee's recommendation to really deep dive on the issues and then provide that recommendation for city council consideration. This is a really way that we can unpack these project proposals, get those questions answered that the committee has, and then allow for an endorsement or recommendation from the committee that will serve to inform greater council as a decision then moves towards a city council vote. Another item that we placed here is really just timely and relevant information to the committee as the need arises. So any kind of business that really is within the scope of work of the committee, if we need to provide that timely and relevant information to the committee, that is something that we would also characterize as really the regular and ongoing business of HCD. So that's one area of work. The really second area of work that's truly important is the plan, policy review, and development. And so much like we were talking today about the needed revisions to our housing trust fund policy as an example, this is where we would really see that linkage to some of our advisory boards. So this would be when we want to look at revisions to policies that guide the work that we do, or create new plans or policies within HCD's overall scope of work. And so again, the idea is that we would have that linkage with our advisory boards, and the action of the committee is to review that information, review those recommendations and the consideration, and then also to be that vehicle that provides a recommendation for city council. Okay, next slide there, Katie. So now getting into the specifics of what that actually looks like and what I'm calling the business of the HCD committee. And so, of course, these will be very familiar. So the ongoing regular business of HCD, what you'll see here is that we framed it from the committee's perspective, right? So we have ongoing land use incentive grant applications. And typically what we come to with this committee is to hear the item and then provide that recommendation to council. That is the same, of course, with our housing trust fund applications, just like we've seen with MHO. The affordable housing projects, for example, the city land deal that was presented today, that would be another component of the official business of the HCD committee, as well as the funding allocations for the CDBG and home program. So that is now a routine item that we see come before this committee, as well as the strategic partnership funds process and allocations. And then again, I have highlighted there at the end, the quarterly information sharing. So just being really clear about how we characterize the regular and ongoing business of HCD. And so hopefully these items really do connect with what you all would consider and see as the ongoing business of HCD and what we typically bring forward for HCD's consideration. I think an interesting element as well is that we're using this time and space. Kind of what we did with 319 is that, we also appreciate that opportunity to come to HCD and provide feedback sessions as well. As we know, as things are complicated, especially in our current climate with affordable housing, getting that early feedback as well is another element that's been important that I've appreciated over the past couple of months, is to have a really thorough process with the HCD committee as it relates to this ongoing work plan. And so that's what we're characterizing there. Katie, I think next slide. So now let's talk about the connection to our advisory boards and then what that means for really that higher level of policy development. So in looking at our landscape of the advisory boards that have a connectivity to HCD, of course, what we're seeing here is the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. So you heard from Barry Bialik, who's the chair of that committee in public comment earlier. But to acknowledge that is a linkage to this committee, as well as other advisory committees, such as the Neighborhood Advisory Committee. Also, I think acknowledging that the city, county, and regional advisory committees also can be a needed linkage into the work of HCD. So naming here the Asheville Buncombe Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee. This is a little bit of a different animal because it is both a city and county committee, as well as it serves as the continuum of care governance. So a little bit of a different structure with their bylaws, but nonetheless hoping to provide that linkage from this particular advisory committee to HCD. And you'll see some of that work that we'll highlight next. But then also looking at the Home Consortium. And so again, kind of a more regional body, which is the Asheville Regional Housing Consortium, which we refer to as the Home Consortium, that is made up of all those jurisdictions that we've named there. So really acknowledging that, again, this is a little bit of a different structure of governance, but seeing that connection into some of the key decisions that must be made at a council level to authorize the work of this consortium. We also anticipate that the Community Reparations Commission will also have a needed linkage, especially as it relates to the housing focus area of the Reparations Commission. So a little bit of looking forward here to really understanding how we may want to connect the Reparations Commission with the work of HCD as it relates to housing, and just going ahead and acknowledging that needed linkage. And we'll kind of see how that shapes up in the coming months as that work continues. Okay, so next slide. So what we hope to do here is then look at some policy areas that we anticipate reviewing through the end of the calendar year and share that timeline here to really talk about also the advisory board referral that really connects with some of the work that our advisory bodies are doing. So first is in September, what we anticipate is bringing forward to HCD our recommendations regarding the allocation of the remaining bond dollars, the remaining affordable housing bond dollars. And with that, we hope to go to the September meeting of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee to really vet those recommendations and have that conversation with the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee to take specific action around this particular policy direction, right? So really connecting strong with the idea of having the AHAC committee serve as that advisory body on policies and really allow that to factor in on the remaining allocation of the bond dollars. So that's going to happen in the September timeframe. Then the next component here is in October, looking at Code Purple. And so again, we're really trying to find some avenues for connection with our other advisory committees. And so looking at an update regarding Code Purple funding allocations, some of that planning has begun now. And so really hoping to connect with HCD and in the October timeframe to look at the Code Purple funding allocations as recommended by the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee. And then last, because we do see the need to really update our housing trust fund policy as we've seen today, really describe those initial changes, initial recommendations, hopefully in the November timeframe. So that would be a review of the Housing Trust Policy in concert with the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. So again, referring that specific task to the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, and then having HCD serve as the body that reviews that information, reviews that recommendation from staff within the lens of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee's work to look at changes to Housing Trust Fund policy. So this is just a snapshot of what we hope to accomplish to the end of the year. And with that, I kind of wanted to look at the next 6 months as well for the remaining calendar. So Katie, if you'll advance the slide. We also wanted to share some of the other business that of the committee that will require this level of connection with our advisory committee. So in thinking about the work of the National Alliance to End Homelessness, really how we're going to have that work tie in to City Council through the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee, especially if there are funding recommendations that come out of that. So we're hoping to see that sometime early next calendar year. We've noted too, having the land use incentive grant policy go under review in partnership with the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee to really strengthen that policy, do needed updates, and then have those come from the committee to the HCD committee. Home ARP funding allocation. So really the primary driver of the home ARP funding is the home consortium, just given the federal frame for the home ARP funding allocations. But we do recognize that going up through council, through HCD is the most logical fit there. Seeing the work of the planning department here with the missing middle housing study, and seeing that touch point with the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee as the referral board. We also have the Affordable Housing Strategies update, looking at the community benefits table, again, that our partners in planning are working on. And they're also reflecting our anticipation of Office of Equity and Inclusion initiatives, OEI, for the reparations alignment of this committee. So this is a little bit of a forecast for some of the work that we hope to take on in kind of the January, June timeframe of next year, and just looking at what we would have planned for this committee and the referring boards as well. Okay,
and
so
Nikki, if I could just add that under the advisory board referral, we are not saying necessarily it's exclusive to just these boards. We are saying that obviously this would be definitely a first touch point, but there may be other boards and commissions that we need to run these initiatives by.
Thank you. Council,
so next
questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
So just a few more slides. I think the next slide really just starts to delineate our next steps. So again, today we're really just seeking feedback on what we've shared today. And then we'll share this out with the impacted advisory boards. We've already had a preliminary discussion with AHAC on July 7th and got their feedback on these areas of work. Then we can come back to HCD in September 20th to really present any necessary revisions, and then for HCD to consider adoption at that time of this as being the formal work plan of the committee. Then you're seeing here, we're proposing that quarterly, the advisory boards can report on progress of policy review work. I think with our timeline, it may be that that's a good touch point with some of the actual revisions that we'll see as well. And then look at this experience. This is something that Rachel Wood has been talking about, is how we're looking at this pilot program in particular for HCD, but looking at how it would inform the development of other work plans for other council committees. So I'm excited that we have the opportunity to really pilot this with HCD and look at the kind of robust work that we're planning for this fiscal year. Next slide, Katie. So again, back to key takeaways. So really just looking at how we use work plans to guide our work together, acknowledging though that they are dynamic, they're living documents, but we really hope to pilot this program, really connect in with our advisory boards, and see if we can do some good work together. So I think at this point, I will happily take any questions and turn it over to you, Chair Turner.
Thank you, Nikki. Appreciate all the work the staff have done quickly to pull this together. Questions from councilwomen? I have one that's just kind of embedded in the list. So there was the slide showing like the 6 months, not just the end of the year. Affordable housing strategies update is in there, just considering like, you know, looking back at the 2008 plan and stuff. Some of the things that we had thrown out at our, I guess, 2 meetings ago when we were kind of brainstorming, you know, what might work plan look like, were pretty big items. Like, would we look at 99 units instead of 49 to trigger council? Or would there be some kind of new bond cycle strategy, and all these kind of big things, right? I'm wondering if that's where all those fall under this just strategies, because my concern is that like it's more than a meeting. And I don't know if this just is a kind of a snapshot of what we hope to look at, but as some of those strategies meeting starts to happen, like people are going to want to work on things for months ahead. It doesn't seem like just a drop-in meeting. So can you speak to that at all? Is that where those strategy ideas would land, and would we have time for to kind of flush things out, or what's your thinking on that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think what we're seeing, especially as again, whether it's projects that really take a depth of understanding, a depth of communication with our development partners, questions back and forth, understanding the desired outcomes. We've had the opportunity to visit HCD at least twice, I know, for the 319 Biltmore project just this year. So I do hope that we can use that tool to really come back to HCD really as often as necessary to complete the work and really to obtain that early feedback so that we know we're headed in the right direction, or if there are specific things that the committee is wanting to see, that we can come back with that information versus, yes, just come with something that we really would be better off if we take that depth of time. So I think while I'm sharing this in this format, I think we do have to recognize that it's not merely just like a plan for each month, that it actually might be that we have some of these component parts that will come to HCD maybe 1, 2, or 3 times, just so that we're able to get early feedback, do any refinement, and then when we're ready and we feel like we have a proposal that is fully prepped, then actually take action. So I think we have the flexibility and the benefit of kind of our working style with this committee to look at that.
Thank you. I wonder if what might come up. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I also wanted to add that, this work program is definitely linked to council priorities. And as we come back with items, if there are larger strategic and or tactical things that you all want us to look at, this helps us provide you all with almost an idea of the scope of the work that we're working on and the resources that are needed to address, what we think are some of your priorities and the initiatives that support your priorities. If, for example, I think some of the details of would you do something with 40 units or 90 units or whatever, those mechanics of things, I think we can incorporate those as we review a number of these policy initiatives. We can find those linkages, I believe, to insert other things without it being a broad, we're working on this specific project. I think it can be embedded in a number of the other initiatives that we have underway. I hope that helps with the.
It does, yes. I know I just have some initiatives I really hope to work on. I'm just trying to figure out how to navigate and for support for them. So I appreciate that. 2 things come to mind that may kind of, one is just preempts this whole process. Like, one of the things I've wondered is if we should be doing more of a cycle of funding like the county does, as opposed to this open door, come to us. And why I say that is because it's getting harder to objectively look at the projects alone across the span of the year when they're all so different. If we were looking at them all on paper and the same criteria, whether it's cost per square, like I mentioned earlier, that I think it might help us get better projects and get better. I think it might even help the development teams because they know their timeline, they know when to come to us, et cetera. So that was one of the ideas, but I don't know how you throw that into this list. So I'm just putting it out there. The other thing that came to mind that would happen before this is that the idea, when we got the last hit count, point in time count from, I think it was Emily that carried it council, we talked about briefly, and it wasn't a council, motion or support to move in this direction. It was just an idea about doing pit counts more frequently. So the next pit count would be in January. And I'm just wondering if we want to plant a little seed right now to try and do one this fall before we get too far down this timeline and realize the time has passed. So just a little plug to maybe consider doing a fall or end of summer pit count if possible. And then I guess we follow up with the January required one. And that's all. Really appreciate. I think it's going to help some boards and commissions that I hear from that like they're not landing their advice or they're not sure how to best plug in. I think this will really help them understand where it's best to support us and council's overall priorities. I like this work plan in general, and I appreciate everyone's efforts. Any other comments or questions from other council women? Okay. Well, great. I don't think we need a motion to approve this or anything. It sounds like it's coming back to us in September for such. So that wraps item number 4, unless staff have anything else to share.
I guess I would just.
For those of you listening at home.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chair Attorney. I would just add that AHAC did really spend some time on this at our last meeting and really supported it. And I believe, I'm not sure if Barry Bialik or Margie Bukowski, who's the vice chair, they may be here to comment because I know we discussed, they were thinking of coming to this meeting or, being on hand to speak to their point of view on this. I don't know if this is the time or if you want to do it during general public comment.
Well, we have Nina Tobish waiting. I'm not sure if this is her item or not, because public comment is the next agenda item. So perhaps we can open it up to callers, see if this is what Nina wanted to speak to. If not, keep her in queue. Katie, can you help us, other callers?
Yes, I will. Just give me one moment. All righty. Caller ending in 7043. Your line is now open.
Yeah, hello, this is Nina. I think that I will reserve my comment for public comment because I'm not sure that it's precisely germane to this.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we heard. Yes, Nina and Katie, do we have other callers?
Yes, we do have another caller. Caller ending in 6029. Your line is now open.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. My name is Patrick Conan, and I'm a resident of East West Asheville. I'm also a member of the city's Boards and Commissions Realignment Working Group. We spent almost half of our July meeting hearing a staff presentation on this council committee realignment pilot. And this pilot program has caused significant confusion and concern amongst members of our working group. The city's asked over 40 residents and a dozen members of staff to do important work to analyze our current board and commission structure and make recommendations on how we can improve this system. In June, staff made significant promises to the working group, indicating that the process would be conducted fairly, without hard deadlines, allowing for a bottom-up analysis of our boards and commission structure. The working group would be provided the time and space to provide recommendations that aren't boxed into a set of predetermined outcomes determined by staff or council, such as cutting our 20 advisory boards down to just 4. Unfortunately, this pilot echoes controversial aspects of the original plan to restructure boards and commissions, the same plan that staff told us they scrapped after the initial public engagement sessions. This top-down plan will affect not only our council committees, but our advisory boards as well. It doesn't make sense for the city to ask residents and staff to spend months evaluating our board system while conducting a parallel effort that staff and council led and will implement significant changes. There seems to be no interest in hearing public feedback on this pilot proposal or to tie this pilot program into the ongoing efforts of the working group. At the presentation before the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, Rachel Wood presented this proposal. In response to questions from the committee, she indicated that the resident-led working group is expected to complete their work in September, and that this pilot program will move forward regardless of what we recommend. I'm concerned that this indicates that the city has no intention of standing behind the promises they've made to our working group, and that this approach will create irreparable harm to the credibility of the city and individual members of staff. I reached out directly to Rachel Wood with my questions and concerns regarding this plan. She's indicated to me that this effort is being directed by council, but I'm honestly not clear how and by whom staff are being directed. I asked this committee to request staff to hold implementation of this pilot program until the working group is able to complete their work and provide thoughtful recommendations. I asked this committee to also direct staff to uphold the commitments made to the resident-led working group at the June meeting. Thank you.
Do we have more callers, Katie?
Yes. Caller ending in 3781, your line is now open.
Hello, all again, this is Barry Bialik, Chair of AHAC. And yes, this the pilot program was presented to us at the our last meeting, and I just kind of want to share my thoughts about it and how it relates to the boards and commissions adjusting. I kind of, to me, I personally looked at these as two completely separate things. I do, I actually don't support a lot of what's going on with the board and commission change. I think that should wait until we're live to have constructive conversations on. But I look at this as just more formalizing how we have been operating for years prior to COVID. In the past, AHAC would always present a list of priorities to council. Council at Hcd meeting would then kind of vote on them, and then we would have what to base our work plan off of. And that's how we operated for years, and we did it successfully. We haven't had that for 2 years since COVID, so we all have been active, operating a little bit more blindly. So I think this just kind of formalizes the process, which we actually were following for years. So I do support this, and as one who's been jumping up and down and saying that we should have some direct discussion with HCD. So we're working on things that we know they're supportive, and that when we have new ideas, we have a forum to bring them to. I think this is a good first start. And I do look forward to hearing kind of what the priorities are. And I think we do, we work as a committee closely with our council liaison, our staff liaisons, and then with some city council members directly to talk about their needs and our needs. So I think this is a good first step to formalizing better communication between between public committees and council committees. And I don't necessarily view this as off target, I don't necessarily view this as saying that a decision has been made on the boards and commissions policy. I think it is an important conversation, but again, I do think that part should wait until we can live and have constructive meetings. I've sat in on some of those meetings, and it's just too much talk, and it's just too hard on Zoom. So I look forward to some live meetings on this, and I look forward to y'all adopting a work plan that then we can take into account and build our AHAC work plan off of. And it will be both ways. We're not just going to work on what we're told to. We'll also suggest things, and we'll have a direct link for how to present those. So I do appreciate the work on this. So thank you. I don't know if Sasha, do you need me to stay on for any questions, or you good?
No, I'm good. That's up to the committee.
Barry, we're happy to have you listen in. I don't have any questions for you specifically. Public comment.
Okay.
Do we have other
thank you.
callers?
I'm continuing to listen in.
Thank you, Barry. We appreciate it. And your continued volunteering on AHAC. Do we have other callers, Katie?
We just have that one caller that's waiting to speak during public comment.
Okay, so we'll reserve Nina for public comment. I'll just share one thing just to say, kind of along Barry's, this work plan isn't a new concept. It's not like it was just born. I know I was working on work plans on previous boards and committees I was on, so I don't want this, I agree with Barry. I don't want this to seem like we're making a decision for the boards and commissions overhaul. Really, we're just officializing some processes and seeing if we can't streamline things better, and if this may become a helpful initiative towards boards and commissions changes, but I don't think we're doing this to thwart that process in any way. I never had that impression. And I think that's all for comment on that. We don't actually need a vote. So let's get on to the next item. So that completes item number 4 of reviewing HCD's committee work plan. And we're now on to item number 5, which is public comment. We know we have Nina Tovish with us. Nina, if you're on the line, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I'm pleased to say that much of what I wanted to say was said by both Patrick and Barry. The reason that I'm participating in the meeting this morning was to try and understand how the committee annual planning process would affect or might affect the work that we're doing at Boards and Commissions Realignment Working Group. As Patrick said, we are fighting our way through the thicket in terms of trying to get valuable data, genuine information from folks who have participated recently or are currently on a board or commission, and also some background data for a few years pre-pandemic so that we can understand what's really working with boards and commissions, where there are problems, what communications issues there are. And it seems all to the good to me that if council committees have work plans and can help coordinate the work of boards and commissions and provide clear channels of ways for boards and commissions to report to them, that's wonderful and seems like a essential management tool. I share Patrick's concern that the existence of such plans and of the number of standing council committees will be used as an argument to shape how many boards and commissions there should be in order to create a specific form of alignment. And I urge all of you who are participating in council committees to please allow us to do this important work of understanding where and how boards and commissions have been effective and where there have been challenges and failures so that we can craft a new structure for them, new sets of procedures, new training opportunities, new onboarding suggestions that will allow information to flow back and forward to city council committees and up to council eventually in a way that will be most effective and serve the needs of residents and council members alike. So thank you. I think there's still room for us to hope that that's aligned, but I do urge you to not rush any decision making on this topic and allow us the messy and challenging business of gathering the information that we need to make high quality recommendations to you. Thank you.
And I think that is our only public comment.
We do have someone else.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
You're fine. Caller ending in 6029. Your line is now open.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. This is Patrick Coonan again. I just wanted to comment on the format of this meeting. Yeah, I just want to state for the record that North Carolina's state of emergency expired yesterday. And with that, the expanded authority for the city to conduct public meetings virtually. Now, I understand that open meetings law is not entirely clear about how council subcommittees conduct their meetings, but I do understand that the city council is also considering what formats to make available to all of our advisory boards moving forward. I personally want to encourage council to consider allowing our advisory boards to continue to meet virtually when legally permissible. I understand that some boards may prefer to meet in person, and I think it's critical that the city put forward the effort to ensure those meetings are live streamed or recorded. It seems to this point that there is no work plan for staff to continue to live stream or record our advisory board meetings if they go back to an in-person format, and that's going to create significant issues around accessibility and transparency for the important work that all of our boards and commissions complete. So I'm glad to see that this meeting is still virtual. I like the ability to call in and make public comment virtually, but I'm just encouraging council to consider making that consistent for all of our boards moving forward. Thank you.
Is that the last caller?
Let me check. Yes, that's the last caller.
Thank you, Katie. All right, everyone. That is the last call of the day, and that closes public comment. And I appreciate everyone's time and energy today. We are otherwise adjourned unless anyone has anything to add or staff. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day. We are adjourned.